Okay. Welcome everyone. Good morning in United States and good evening in New Delhi, India. We are starting with our monthly distinguished lecture series program for the Council for Strategic Affairs. And our honored guest today is Professor Sreeram Sundar Chaulia. Before I introduce the speaker, I will introduce Council for Strategic Affairs in brief. Council for Strategic Affairs imparts education in the field of international relations. It fosters dialogue and discussion and debate on geopolitical issues. It encourages strategic studies in general to raise the level of awareness. And overall, Council for Strategic Affairs aims to contribute towards world peace and prosperity. We have certain activities that include a monthly roundtable discussion. The roundtable discussion happens on the second Monday of each month at 8 p.m. Eastern Daytime. We have a monthly distinguished guest lecture series by a domain expert, as we are doing. Usually we try to do it on last Saturday of the month, and we try to time it in a way that folks from US and India both can attend. We also organize symposia, meetings, and conferences. We promote publications of articles on geopolitics and related subjects. So pretty much all of you saw this Eventbrite invite for today's session. And although our speaker is live with you, but this is his picture, Professor Sreeram Chaulia. Professor Chaulia is professor and dean at Jindal School of International Affairs in Sonipat, India. It's in Haryana, and it's part of O.P. Jindal Global University. Professor Chaulia has a very distinguished career. Actually, he has had extensive amount of higher studies. He holds a doctorate and a Master's of Art in Political Science and International Relations from the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs from Syracuse University in New York State. He also has a Master's of Science degree in History of International Relations from the London School of Economics and Political Science from UK. He was a Radhakrishnan British Chevening Scholar at the University of Oxford, UK, from where he obtained a Bachelor of Arts degree in Modern History. He has a BA in Honours from the St. Stephen's College from University of Delhi. His areas of specialization include diplomacy, foreign policy, comparative politics, international political economy, international organizations, armed conflicts, humanitarian practices, and contemporary world history. He teaches courses related to these subjects and has over 900 publications in all these various domains. His writings have appeared in journals in US, UK, Australia, Canada, India, and most of them are on international relations. He has written a number of books. He was contributing editor to the book People Who Influenced the World Over the Past 100 Years that was published in 2005. He is the author of the book International Organizations and Civilian Protection, Power, Ideas, and Humanitarian Aid in Conflict Zones. He contributed 2 chapters to a book, Handbook of India's International Relations, published in 2011 from Routledge, London. One of the books was called Modi Doctrine, the Foreign Policy of India's Prime Minister. It was published in 2016 by Bloomsbury, New York. And he's writing a book currently I'm aware of. It's called Crunch Time, Narendra Modi's National Security Crisis. So he's a widely published scholar, but besides being a scholar, he is a very good orator and speaker. He has been interviewed on issues relating to global economy, contemporary armed conflicts and world politics by Russia Today, RT Channel, CGTN from Beijing, South Africa Broadcasting Network Corporation, Voice of America, Australian Broadcasting Corporation, Al Jazeera, Associated Press, Agence France Presse, AFP, New York Times, USA Today, and Wall Street Journal. He was a frequent contributor to Singapore-based syndicated columnist service Opinion Asia and has been cited in world media for his analytical articles on pressing current events. He was a regular commentator on international current issues on Lok Sabha TV, Rajya Sabha TV, Doordarshan, and Republic TV in India. And I must say that he is an excellent speaker both in English language as well as in Hindi language, which is rather uncommon these days. So there are some housekeeping rules before I invite Professor Chaulia. I would like every one of you to mute yourself to avoid noise interference. Please change your cell phone setting to vibration mode. While our esteemed speaker is speaking, please don't try to interrupt him. Only those members of the audience who identify themselves by name will be allowed to pose questions. We don't want any anonymous people asking questions. We would encourage you to send all your questions by our chat function so that there is some orderliness in asking the questions. Please be very precise and specific in asking a question. We really don't want questions or comments in the form of a monologue. And lastly, we are recording this event, and the recording would be available to all of us on YouTube and Vimeo channel within 24 hours. So without further ado, I do invite our today's speaker, who is going to speak on the Indo-Pacific community and the geopolitics of Asia. Just one last comment. I have followed Professor Chaulia's career since maybe 2006, 2007, when he was in Syracuse University. And at that time, as a graduate student, he used to write a column in Asia Times Online, and he used to do book review. And I was so surprised that every week there'll be at least 3 books reviewed by Professor Sreeram Chaulia. So he has been very energetic from very young age, and he's a very young professor and dean. So let's all welcome Professor Chaulia. Professor Chaulia.
Thank you, Adityan ji, for the very kind welcome and the fond memories. Yes, our association goes back quite a bit, and I'm so happy to see Council for Strategic Affairs growing and becoming a platform for engaging in serious thought and analysis of emerging trends in international affairs. So, and the diaspora connection between India and the United States, I think, is being strengthened by such institutions. So I salute the entire team of Council for Strategic Affairs, and it's really an honor to be featured in your monthly series and to be talking to all of you. I'm going to wade in directly into the topic, given the time constraints. What do we mean by an Indo-Pacific community? This is very critical. The term itself, has been historical. There's a historical usage of it going back to the early 20th century by Nazis and others who thought of it in a very different way from what we envisage it today. At that time, the Germans thought of Indo-Pacific as including China, India, and other anti-Western and anti-colonial countries coming together to form kind of an axis against the British and the Americans. Now, when we say Indo-Pacific, of course, it's got a different connotation. I'll come to that. But the point is, we're talking about a community, and what makes a community? I want to begin with that. When we say this is the confluence of the Indian and the Pacific Oceans coming together, it's a construct because geographically, the Indian Ocean region and the Pacific have have historically been seen as distinct from each other. But with the rise of China and the increasing, commercial flows across this whole arc from the east coast of Africa all the way up to the Pacific Island nations, Korea and Japan, Northeast Asia, that whole arc is now, we are calling it Indo-Pacific. And the term has come into vogue, especially in the last decade or so, because of, in reference to the increasing power and dominance of China. I'll come back to this. So when we say community, what does it require to form a community? I mean, just think about a neighborhood, anywhere you live in the world. It must have some rules, right? It must have some kind of a glue and a basis to hold it together. And it must have a sense of some kind of empathy and camaraderie and neighborliness that makes a community. So Indo-Pacific community, what are the building blocks and the principles of values? I want to go on to them briefly before going deeper into what kind of strategies and geopolitics are being played out there. The first thing is what we are all calling, which is a rules-based order. That's the first principle or the pillar of Indo-Pacific community. And the connotation of this rules-based order, almost all the members who subscribe to this term of Indo-Pacific now, especially the rim countries of the Indo-Pacific, Japan, Australia, and India, these three are using it, and the United States, which is a kind of a resident power in the Pacific, is also using it. These four, of course, constitute the Quad, and I'll come back to that. But the point is, what do we mean by rules-based order? We are often saying rules-based order. Rules-based order basically implies might is not right. That's the fundamental point. It's not that there is some kind of a equity or justice in the Indo-Pacific, or should be there in the Indo-Pacific. And it should not be an arena where the most powerful countries or players can ride roughshod over smaller ones. And they can just roll them over, they could dominate them, exploit them, harass them, intimidate them. So without that, you cannot have a community, right? So rules-based order is primary. The leaders of all the Quad countries, as well as many others in the region and beyond from outside, are now emphasizing on this rules-based order. And there is a perception that it is coming under threat. I'll come back to the threat a little later. Second pillar or principle on the base of which we can build the community, balance of power. You would have heard the formulation. We, especially India, talk about it a lot. We want a multipolar Asia and a multipolar world. And it's often juxtaposed with the Chinese preference for a unipolar Asia and a bipolar world. That's the classic Chinese formulation, which of course they use different ways of expressing it, but that's what they prefer. So Indo-Pacific community believes in a balance of power, which means essentially multiple power centers, not just one big one in the region. And that's non-negotiable. And so the preference for multipolarity, being 3, 4, 5 different centers of power in this region, is very important. It means that we want power to be diffused, not concentrated in one hand, and we want some kind of a democratic order in our community. So you're not going to have a situation where there's just one big boss who's carrying a huge stick and is dictating terms to all the smaller players. So rules-based order, balance of power, two principles. Third principle, economic freedom. Um, you must have heard of this term, resilient supply chains. Nowadays, it's become a very commonly used phrase whenever world leaders meet, especially Quad leaders or Indo-Pacific leaders or partners of India. We talk about resilient supply chain, and this especially came into very stark relief after the coronavirus pandemic began in early 2020, and this is linked to the idea of economic freedom for the members of the community. If you are really going to build a community, you cannot have a situation where, like I said before, there's one big house, and the rest are all like little shanties and are dependent on the largest or on the mercy of this one big house. So we need economic freedom, meaning critical raw materials, energy, infrastructure, um, telecommunications, both digital and physical, crucial building blocks for societies and economies. Those must not be held in hock to one country. We need more diversified kind of base for this. So economic freedom choices. We cannot have a situation like we had last year, 2020, where everything from ventilators to protective equipment to drugs to oxygen, everything was being concentrated in the hands of China, and where the others were all being required to fulfill political conditionalities of China before they could release these things. So there is this real danger of not just military or political power, but economic power being concentrated in one big hand. And that, again, it goes against the principles of Indo-Pacific community. So we need economic freedom. The fourth one, and this is a controversial pillar on which there is no consensus, should there be democracy or democratic, at least the way we define it, free and fair elections, multi-party system, competition for power, what do you call it, turnover of power from one party to another through people's mandate? Should that be a bedrock principle for building the community, Indo-Pacific community, or not? Here, I think this is probably the most controversial topic, because at the heart of the Indo-Pacific, especially on the right flank, if you look at the map, is the ASEAN region. And in ASEAN, out of the 10 countries, only Indonesia and the Philippines, and to a lesser extent Malaysia, can be considered really electoral democracies. The remaining 7 are not. But we want them to be in the community for geopolitical reasons. We cannot say, Vietnam, you don't belong to the community because you're a one-party dictatorship. We can't say, Brunei, you can't belong to the community because you're a monarchy. We can't say, Myanmar, you can't belong because you're a military dictatorship. Or Thailand, or Laos, or Cambodia. There's so many in this region which do not fulfill the criteria of being electoral democracies. So should democracy be one of the pillars or the criteria to be part of the community? I think there is an idealistic liberal perspective on this, especially being now championed by current Joe Biden administration in Washington. But then there is also the realpolitik view, which is that look at the geography, look at the critical countries in the region. There are many which are not authoritarian, which are not democratic, but which are still relevant for us, and which will be which have issues with China, and which can help to create the other three principles, which is rules-based order, balance of power, and economic freedom. So if you insist on democracy as also a pillar for the community of building the Indo-Pacific, I think we are going to run into limitations. And the view in India is, while democracy is desirable, trying to impose it from outside through military interventions or through pressure tactics or through excommunication or through exile does not really work and cannot generate. So there is this element, the question mark about the political culture of this community. Should it really all be based on sheer democratic? In other words, it's like the European Union, 27 countries, they have some core minimum standard. There are some countries that sometimes do not adhere to the EU level values of the whole European community. For example, Hungary or Poland or Slovenia. But nonetheless, they remain members. And overall, you don't have like a hard military dictatorship like Thailand or Myanmar, or a one-party dictatorship like Vietnam or Cambodia in the EU. So to that extent, should it be values-based? I don't think so, because Asia is more diverse. Asia is a lot more heterogeneous than Europe is. And as we will see, we need that diversity to come in to create this community. So these are the four principles. The fourth one, as I said, is debatable. So I reiterate: rules-based order, balance of power, economic freedom, democracy with a question mark. Yeah, this is the basis. Now, what should the countries that are now starting to believe and to reify and to create this Indo-Pacific community be doing? That's the next question. Is it only talk, or are we going to have some action and strategy? Right? And here, there are many concrete ideas that have been floated, especially by the Quad members, which probably form the fulcrum of Indo-Pacific community, but also many others who've been talking about it. And so what we need is a kind of, I'm going to go through a few of these strategies through which we can realize this community of Indo-Pacific. And then I'll talk about the pushback against it and the limitations. So the first, of course, is Quad, as I said, is the kind of nucleus for this idea to emerge. The Australians, the Japanese, in fact, Japan, Shinzo Abe, the great Japanese leader who had to unfortunately step down due to his health a few months ago, Shinzo Abe was the one who initially brought back the idea of Indo-Pacific in 2007, 2008, when he was prime minister at the time. And interestingly, Shinzo Abe talked about all the only democracies coming together. He didn't have this broader vision of a geopolitical construct as much as a values-based one. But anyway, the point is, Quad is there: Japan, Australia, India, and United States. But that's quite insufficient to realize the Indo-Pacific on its own. So we need what we are calling Quad Plus. So the first strategy that we are seeing emerge in the development of this concept is to expand the Quad in informal way, but in a way which is agile, meaning it should not become a kind of a very formal intergovernmental organization with a headquarters or a secretariat and with a staff, with a joint military command. The Asian NATO, you've heard this term before. People talk Asian NATO, military alliance with all kinds of formal structures. So I don't think we are ready for it. The plain and simple answer is, last year and even this year, the Trump administration tried to entice South Korea to formally start joining the Quad. And the feedback they got from Seoul was that it's just too risky for them. They cannot afford to antagonize China so openly. And secondly, they need Chinese cooperation to control the North Korea problem, nuclear problem, and the missile problem of Kim Jong-un. So there's no way that they can join an alliance that will be that the Chinese view with a lot of suspicion. And the Chinese, therefore, by the way, that there is no such thing called Indo-Pacific. This is just a colonial construct, and we should stick with Asia-Pacific because that's the old nomenclature for this region, which benefited China immensely and which actually enabled China to become dominant. So we need Quad Plus, but who are going to join it? Well, if you pitch it as formally join the Quad, start attending the summit meetings and the ministerials, there will be hesitance. You will find lots of countries hemming and hawing but not joining. So it has to be informal but agile, and there is strength in numbers. It can go up to 8, 9, or even 10 members. I don't see the problem because anyway it's not formally structured through a treaty, and it's not a formal alliance. But we should limit the group size. It cannot be infinite because otherwise there will be no cohesion. You'll see more and more divisions and differences, and so it's got to be a kind of a coalition of the willing. It's not going to be a universal organization or an institution where we invite all the countries in the region to join it and to start participating in summits and ministerials and other mechanisms, lower level, at the level of bureaucrats. So it's got to be limited in size. So last year during the pandemic, Vietnam was invited, New Zealand, South Korea. There was a talk of some of the small Pacific Island nations who are also part of the Quad, of the Indo-Pacific, to engage in more structured dialogue mechanisms. So that thing is one of the strategy, Quad Plus expansion. Okay, so that's the first strategy, but it's still at the debate level as to how to expand, who to invite, and in what form. The second thing, of course, is the strategy apart from the membership is how to counter the Belt and Road Initiative of China, especially in infrastructure. Because what has happened, and one of the reasons why there is an imbalance of power or lack of economic freedom, to go back to my principles, is because the Chinese have filled the space left by the retreat of the US, not just under Trump, but even before. And the absence of countervailing powers within the region that can match the Chinese in checkbook, in writing out loans and giving out foreign aid and assistance to many of the countries that fall within this region. From the east coast of Africa all the way to the Pacific Island nations, you will find Chinese projects. It's part of the Belt and Road Initiative. It's massive, right? And the Chinese overcapacity in manufacturing, in engineering goods, in infrastructure, all these are being exported now around the world in form of these BRI projects. So you will recall recently at the G7+3 summit in Cornwall, in the UK, President Biden talked about the Build Back Better for the world, and the American diplomats have now started coining this term B3W, 3 as in the digit 3, B3W as a strategy or a long-term vision to counter the BRI in infrastructure in chosen selected third countries. So that is one of the principal strategies going forward. Now again, how to actualize it, which countries, for example, in which select third country should Quad or Quad Plus countries jointly invest and build infrastructure. I would say we should choose countries where the Chinese already are present. I mean, there's no country where the Chinese are not present, but you have to choose countries where there is concern about excessive Chinese control and domination and hegemony. Yeah, either within the government or in the civil society or in the opposition or generally in the society at large, where there is worry and where people are anxious about the growing Chinese shadow. So in my view, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Madagascar, uh, Maldives, Fiji, and a few others in Southeast Asia and in the Pacific Island, and in Oceania, which is around Australia. We should be targeting some relatively small countries, poorer countries, um, that are under Chinese debt burden, and have already fallen into this trap, or are being forced to concede major chunks of their strategic maritime or coastal territories to the Chinese to be used as potentially as de facto bases in the future. So the B3W that's being proposed as a kind of a new G7 plus 3 and beyond, and Quad and others coming together, including the Europeans, we should be aiming at um putting up counter proposals and building parallel things. For example, in Sri Lanka, we have a crisis again now building up because of the return of the Mahinda and Gotabaya Rajapaksa combination. And more projects that had initially been offered to, for example, to Japan and India, which had bid jointly, are being cancelled, and new projects are being awarded to the Chinese to build right next door at the southern tip of India. So there is a problem there with the growing Chinese presence. Um, I think the same is happening now in Myanmar because the military coup, the Chinese suddenly find themselves at an advantage as compared to the earlier hybrid regime when Aung San Suu Kyi and the democratic forces were still open to Western, Indian, and Japanese investments. So we need to pick some countries and do some kind of a serious infrastructure projects there jointly by Quad Plus countries or under the umbrella of B3W. Third thing, the EU India connectivity partnership has been recently signed, and this is a good strategy. Again, it's very clear. EU wants to partner with India to invest in third countries in Indo-Pacific region. Select countries which may be facing Chinese pressure or which may already have fallen under Chinese neo-colonial control, and we need to offer, bids and build ports or railway networks or telecom, 5G, wherever it looks like the Chinese are stealing a march over us, we need a collective pushback through these kind of projects. Then there is the Africa Growth Corridor. Some of you would have heard about it. It's a low profile thing started by India under Narendra Modi a few years ago. And this is to link Southeast Asia with the coast of India and the Indian Ocean region all the way up to the east coast of Africa. Mozambique, Tanzania, Uganda, South Africa, and on the offshore Madagascar and these kind of countries, Mauritius. So the idea is that we have started some projects under Asia Africa Growth Corridor, but they need to be scaled up to a different level. It can only happen with the involvement of the EU, with the involvement of the US, and of course Japan, which is financially a very big player in this region. They're all willing. The question is we need to identify projects and countries. I'm coming down to the level of tactics and strategy. Fourth, military interoperability. We need to look for potential bases from which joint operations can be launched and from which power can be projected in the region. Right now, we have Malabar exercises being done by Quad countries. In fact, you will remember Malabar has had a very tortuous journey and history. Malabar started with a bang in 2007, with all 4 Quad countries being present. And then the then Indian government of Manmohan Singh developed cold feet once China objected to it, saying, you can't gang up against us like this. And so Malabar was turned into a bilateral affair, or at most a trilateral, and it never became a quadrilateral or a bigger formation, Quad plus type formation. So Malabar is there, but then Malabar happens once a year. and for a definite number of days. It's not a permanent presence or patrolling that is actually required, and that the smaller countries in the region are looking for. ASEAN countries, for example, the ones who got disputes with China, they want a permanent, patrolling and presence of Quad or Quad plus countries in this region to show the Chinese and to push them back, and through a kind of show of naval force, joint naval force. So Indo-Pacific Command of the US, of course, is there in Okinawa, in Japan, especially in Japan and South Korea. They've got a presence, naval presence there. But then we need to all form, as I said, a coalition of the willing, or a plurilateral grouping where there is a more permanent presence. So I think we should look for, identify friendly countries and start setting up some kind of a joint operations command or something like that. Command is too far ahead, because that happens only in a formal alliance like NATO. But at least a joint operations base in the Indian Ocean region. India has set up something called a Indian Ocean Fusion Center. And a number of the Quad countries have been invited and have been joining. France is also there in a big way. So there are countries both within the region and from beyond who want to be participating in these kind of initiatives. So, if Quad if the Indo-Pacific is purely economic or, based on infrastructure alone, it is not sufficient. There must be a military component. Sometimes, Quad country leaders and ministers and spokespersons, diplomats often say, no, this is not a military alliance. This is not a military alliance. They keep saying that. And the era of formal alliances is over. But the point is, without the militarization of the grouping or of the concept, we cannot challenge the militarization that China is already doing. For example, they have built dozens of bases, de facto military bases, all across the South China Sea, by dredging up islands, occupying them, and shooing away the Filipinos and the Vietnamese and the Malaysians and the Taiwanese. So the point is, China is flexing muscle militarily. So to tiptoe around it and say, oh no, we will not do military, this is purely going to be a kind of a, a construct which will just spread prosperity and create alternatives to Chinese. Well, we need to create a military alternative to Chinese also. So I think there has to be a military and defense component. You cannot shy away from it. The problem with it is the moment you introduce it, some countries develop cold feet. Now you look at the biggest countries in ASEAN, you've got strong militaries, Vietnam and Indonesia. They may not agree. I've traveled to both countries and often spoken to their top leaderships, and I often find hesitance. They don't want to be seen to be joining any kind of military thing, which will do what we call in international relations jargon, hard balancing, hard counterbalancing of China. They are only interested in soft balancing, diplomatic, infrastructure, yes, economic, yes, but not military. So, but I think we have to find a way around this, and we have to be creative. It's not a formal alliance, but it must have a military component. It's nice, you have to find a midway. The last, of course, is since the pandemic and health and environmental crisis have now come to the fore, we need strategies by which we can assist countries in the region and beyond with vaccines and also with the negative effects of climate change. G7+3 had a lot of the communique that happened recently is talking about doing such things. The Quad countries have also been pledging that they will do much more to help small island nations. This is a maritime area, right? There are, of course, land boundary issues that we have with China and China has with Vietnam and other countries. But essentially, we're talking about a long-term maritime community. This is going to be across the waters. And we need to pay attention to small island nations. Take the Pacific Island countries. Both China and India, we now have, and Australia also, they've got these forums by which they interact with the Pacific Island countries. But what has happened is these small countries like Fiji and Vanuatu and Tonga, Kiribati, all of them, Marshall Islands, Solomon Islands, all of them have shifted. They used to be under Australian kind of influence, zone of influence, sphere of influence. But now increasingly the Chinese have come in with bigger money and are dominating these small island nations. But the Chinese don't do anything to mitigate climate change because they actually export pollution through their BRI projects. Most of the BRI projects are environmentally extremely harmful to the so-called recipient, the beneficiary, to the so-called beneficiary countries. And they increase the carbon footprint and the pollution in these countries. So Japan has an idea. They have what they call Partnership for Quality Infrastructure. And Prime Minister Modi of India has promoted the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. All of these are similar ideas, and we need to merge them together with a new basis on which to lend and on which to create sustainable, especially for the small island nations. And for them, they will value it a lot, and it will matter a lot. Even bigger country like Indonesia is a huge archipelago. So although it's a big country, it's got lots of islands that are facing climatic threat. Maldives, Mauritius, I mean, on the other side, the western of the Indo-Pacific towards Africa also. So if we are able to change the paradigm of lending with higher quality of rules and standards, especially environmental standards, I think that's going to make a big difference. So this is where I'll conclude by saying that you need all these things I've threshed out. We need to concretize a lot of things. It's still work in progress. You will remember the old concept of Asia Pacific took almost 30, I mean, it's now in existence since the 1970s and 80s when APEC was created, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. That took like three and a half decades to mature to where it is today. Unfortunately, India has not been admitted there, even though we wanted membership. So it was an exclusive grouping where China was there, the US was there, pretty much all these countries we're talking about are there, but India was excluded. So Indo-Pacific is a more inclusive idea. It's a more democratic one, but it will take time to mature. And some of it is because domestically some countries are not prepared. And then, sometimes countries face setbacks because of change of guard. When a new party comes to power and old one goes out, suddenly they revise their foreign policies. Now look at Australia, classic example. Under Scott Morrison, the current conservative regime, they've been very, very clear-eyed about China and the threat it poses. But when the Labour and the other side, when other parties, liberal ones, left liberal ones come to power in Australia, they have been more accommodative of China. The same could happen. I mean, India, of course, is stable, and we've had a Modi government for 7 years, and it's likely to continue for the foreseeable future. But on the other hand, when there are shifts, Trump administration to Biden, Shinzo Abe, since he has left, Yoshihide Suga, the new Japanese prime minister, is struggling. His approval ratings are very low. So one doubts whether he can really commit the same kind of strategic energy that Shinzo Abe had done to create the Indo-Pacific first place. Same thing across the region. Joko Widodo in Indonesia, very popular leader, stable, but vacillating between taking a stand and between somehow trying to work it out with the Chinese. ASEAN as a grouping is struggling to be able to control the situation in Myanmar, which is very bad. And there are all kinds of tussles going on internally in many of these countries. So, and the Chinese are looking for those weaknesses and will try to exploit it, like they're doing in Sri Lanka or in Nepal, for that matter. So we need to wait. In a way, we cannot will it into fruition very quickly also. But work is underway. Some of these strategies I'm talking about is not purely like kind of like I'm taking out of the shelf. They're already underway. Projects are happening, but at a slow pace. And probably because it requires consensus community, we're talking about 10 or more countries or a coalition. It takes time, right, to create consensus. We are not like a monolithic entity like a Communist Party of China that decides that I'm going to, build a special economic zone in Fiji, and here is the money. and here are my workers and engineers, and let's do it in record time, and in 6 months it's up and running. We can't do it. We simply can't do it because we are mostly, it's a coalition, and many of which are democratic countries. So getting the will is going to be critical, and sustaining the will. But luckily for us, the Chinese are in many ways making it easier for us through their conduct, especially under Xi Jinping in their so-called, great power behavior as a great power today. They are intimidating and are pushing many countries to the wall. So in that sense, if China does not moderate its behavior, Indo-Pacific or Quad Plus becomes stronger and stronger. So in a way, we need the jolt and the shock of the pandemic, and the way they spawned the pandemic, and the way they spread it around the world, and the way they tried to control the fate of destiny of of all these countries through their conditional aid and through BRI. They are making it clear that there is a problem, and you may have seen, there are all kinds of, you should go to the Pacific Island countries and what is happening in those small nations. That's where China is revealing its true colors. They're behaving in very imperialistic fashion there. No even pretension of being, win-win cooperation and South-South and all these rhetoric that they usually put out in their diplomatic communique. Nothing like that. You see what they're doing in Africa. You see what they're doing in small island nations. You get a sense of what is coming next. So I think people are aware of this peril, and there's no denying that Indo-Pacific would never come about if not for the China threat. But there is more to it, and it requires consensus building, community building. Possibly we should have summits, an Indo-Pacific summit. So far, G7+3 has happened, Quad summit has happened. We should invite a large number of presidents and prime ministers from across the region, and actually make it a high level, I would say, a summit level initiative, simply to bring it to life. Because then what happens is the bureaucracies and the lower people lower down the rung take the cue and start meeting, and then it creates a formal processes, more interactive processes to build the community. So I'll stop there. It's a work in progress, but it's necessary. If this community, if people, if the residents of this community want to live in dignity, we have to make this community work, and we have to make this a success. Otherwise, we are up for total neo-colonial domination. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Chaulia. It was a fascinating lecture. The lucidity of strategic thinking on your behalf, I am really, really very thankful to you. We have a number of questions, but before we take questions, this is the first time you are addressing Council for Strategic Affairs, but I can promise all of our audience this would not be the last time. You are our permanent invitee. Anytime when you are able to spare some time, we would be honored to have you as a speaker, either on this topic or on other topics. Your presentation is so crystal clear that there is no doubt about any questions. As taking my editorial prerogative, I may make a couple of comments here before I open it to questions. This issue of Asian NATO has been raised from time to time, and we have to be very cautious not to fall into that trap. So one of the groups that uses the word Asian NATO is the so-called hawks in United States, or the former neocon group. The word Asian NATO itself is an oxymoron. NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So you cannot have an Asian North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And unfortunately, people have very little historical perspective. There used to be an analogous organization called SEATO, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, which had its slow, protracted demise in late 60s and 1970s. So to say that, Quad is Asian NATO, we are saying it's doomed. I think that's not a good kind of strategy. The other thing is that China itself is using the word Asian NATO to describe the Quad because they want to indulge in fear mongering, especially in the ASEAN community. They are trying to scare the ASEAN countries that it is part of the Western imperialism. Asian NATO will take away all your autonomy in ASEAN. So I think we have to be very cautious about that. The second thing you mentioned was the Chinese behavior with island countries and somewhat neo-imperialistic behavior, domination and all. I think nothing is farther from truth about that particular statement. China always has been imperialistic country. It's not neo-imperialistic country. It has always been imperialistic country. The core China is very small. The periphery of China, which China has acquired by force, does include at one point in time independent Tibet, independent East Turkestan, countries from the past, Manchuria, part of Mongolia as Inner Mongolia. So China has always been imperialistic, and Mao himself said that Tibet is the palm of the hand. There are five fingers, and I'm not going to elaborate on that. But even as recently, China's one of the wolf warriors, Yang Jiechi, in one of the Shangri-La dialogues, had told some of the ASEAN countries that China is a big country and all of you are small countries. So you need to understand what we are saying and accept that. There's nothing far from coercion, a big country bullying the small country. So everyone knows about China's behavior, and we have to, strategize taking that into consideration, whether we immediately go for Indo-Pacific community as a military alliance. To my mind, a larger Indo-Pacific community and a shorter, very nimble, smaller, militarized alliance of Quad, which has the capability. All the island countries and others do not have that kind of military capability. So we may have to have two-track approach. One, an economic, civil, mercantile organization that is based on rule-based order, an Indo-Pacific community, which basically transplants the Asia-Pacific concept, and a possible military alliance, a hard alliance, which is Quad, which can go in parallel but not impose upon each other. So those were my just editorial comments, but we will go on with the question and answers. My request is that if I take somebody's name, please, put your video on so Professor Chaulia can see whose question is being asked. We have a number of questions and some people have submitted multiple questions. So I'll try to do one question each from each audience person. The first question is from Vivek, and I think it is Dr. Vivek Sharma. Is that it, Dr. Vivek Sharma? Well, he's not talking. So I will read his question. It is very interesting that democracy is described as controversial rather than aspirational or utopian. I think you had, peripherally mentioned that democracy cannot be sine qua non for participation in larger Indo-Pacific community because you cannot change the system of governance of these countries as an essential criteria for participation. So the questioner says that he has his own biases as a liberal thinker, and he wants you to elaborate a little bit more on this issue of democracy as an essential criteria or as an aspirational criteria.
Well, thank you. I think it's a very core issue, and then in fact, Biden is pushing more and more of this. That we need to, all the democracies need to challenge all the autocracies. I recently wrote a piece in the Hindu saying that we have to be selective. and we can't, frankly, antagonize all the authoritarian countries. That's just not being pragmatic and not recognizing the hard realities on the ground. China, the size and the intent is so massive. The intent to re-establish, um, what they used to call Tianxia in imperial times, the idea of a world with China as a center, a Sino-centric world order. Already the South China Sea, they say it's become a Chinese lake, and they want to enforce it through gunboats and through their bases, military bases. So if we are looking at that kind of an adversary, we can't be selective and choosy in building a coalition. We go back in time to the Cold War period. I mean, the most dramatic shifts in global balance of power happened through uh, coalitions or alliances or partnerships between democracies and autocracies. The most famous, of course, was Mao's China and Nixon and Kissinger. They did not hesitate to embrace China and recognize it at the time, believing that that was necessary to corner the Soviet Union. So I think realpolitik is necessary because the Chinese are playing hard power politics. If we stay back and say values and we'll only include, I already gave examples. Can you leave out Vietnam? Vietnam is a country that has challenged China very, very bravely over millennia. Can we leave out even Russia? We want Russia to be involved. In fact, that's the other big problem, because the liberals in the West want to attack both China and Russia and take them both simultaneously. I think that these are all errors. So we need a kind of a selective application of these values, to the extent that we don't want an authoritarian behemoth like China trampling over all of us. We will oppose the authoritarianism. But we can't say we oppose authoritarianism in every country in the region. Then we are so diverted from the main task of counterbalancing China. And then you cannot achieve anything. So I think we need more Kissinger and less, Bill Clinton type values right now, because what we need is some kind of a, more hard-nosed approach, because we have to recognize what's on the other side. So, of course, we should highlight the human rights problems in, like Adityanji was saying, in Xinjiang, in Tibet, in Inner Mongolia, in Hong Kong. The Communist Party is going to celebrate a grand 100th anniversary on July 1st in a few days. And they're going to claim that, we are the greatest and the success in the history of humanity and all that. But the point is, we have to point out the excesses that they are committing. But that critique should not mean that we should dissociate ourselves or from countries that are willing and capable of counterbalancing China. So my view is that the democracy thing should be instrumentally used, and we should not become too picky and choosy, because the opposition is quite strong and we need unity.
Excellent,
Page
Professor
11.
Chaulia. I'll go to the next question.
Can you hear me?
Mr. Ankush Bhandari from New Jersey. And I think you have sort of, touched upon the question, but I will still articulate it. He has, gone through the vicissitudes of the Quad and suggests that there has been slow progress. There was not even a joint statement made. And basically, he is asking you to speculate on the future of Quad as a grouping.
I think it's getting better and bigger. The fact that we had a summit meeting a few months ago was a sign of serious intent on the part of all four countries to take this forward, because earlier it was at a lower level. And so foreign ministers or defense ministers or national security advisors or secretaries in ministries, that's at a much lower level. When prime ministers, presidents meet, like I said, the entire system starts moving in a certain direction, policy direction. So summits are important. And like I said, I mean, I was looking for some kind of activism by Quad recently when the Philippines was under pressure again from the Chinese. You must have followed Theodore Locsin, the Filipino foreign minister, even went on a kind of a foul-mouthed public rant against the Chinese because they were so frustrated because the Philippines here is a weak country, doesn't have a strong military of its own, uh, and which is whose leadership had kowtowed and almost caved into the Chinese. We call it bandwagoning in our literature. Small countries submitting themselves to bigger ones because might is right, and it's better to be under their shelter than to challenge them. Small countries do it when they have no option or alternative. So the Philippines did that. Rodrigo Duterte completely um, prostrated before the Chinese, and still they are giving him trouble and trying to occupy more and more Filipino sovereign waters. So what do you do? I think that's the kind of thing where I was saying Quad needs to make a show of presence. You know, Japan and Vietnam have got strong military to military relations already, and we should have, mounted some kind of a presence and a challenge around the disputed the Whitsun Reef and Spratly Islands where this was going on, and the Chinese have what they do is they have a swarming tactics. They just completely surround an area and then they declare it's theirs, and then they start building their base there, and these small countries have no option except to flee. So that is the kind of litmus test we should pick. We should not be looking for outright military confrontation with the Chinese. Nobody wants war, but we must compete in the waters navally. So that's why I was saying militarization of the Indo-Pacific is important. People often see militarization as or securitization as a negative thing. Some people say, well, why we should avoid conflicts. We don't want. A lot of liberals in the US say things like, we should just coexist and cooperate. Why are you becoming so hawkish against China? We should find a way to coexist. But the problem is the Chinese don't want to coexist. From Mao used to say things like, there is a east wind and there is a west wind. And he used to cite Chinese proverb saying that either the east wind will prevail or the west wind will prevail. You cannot coexist. And now Xi Jinping says the west is declining and the east is rising. East, he doesn't include India or anybody else in the Indo-Pacific. East means China. That's all, as the center piece. So clearly they are not willing in an accommodative position. So we cannot be. If we are, then in other words, we are just giving more and more space to them to expand. So I think we have to take a stand on countries like the Philippines or Vietnam that are under pressure, and they are looking for some support and some assistance, but they don't want to be open about it. So we have to engage with them in intense dialogue and come up with some pragmatic ways by which joint military presence and show of force can be made.
Thank you very much. Next question is from Dr. Shobha. Dr. Shobha is a practicing cardiologist and is a very astute geostrategic thinker who is leading an initiative on American Indo-Pacific Forum. Her question is mainly in the dimension of economy and commerce. And basically, the essence of the question is, why can't other countries put an embargo on made in China products as a way to economically counterbalance China?
Well, it's a hard question because last year when the LAC crisis started here in Eastern Ladakh, people spontaneously came out to boycott Chinese products, traders associations, consumers. I was just seeing analysis for last week that more than 40% of Chinese Indian consumers say that ethically they are opposed to buying Chinese made products. So as long as they occupy contested terrain at the LAC and try to uh, impose major national security challenges to us, we cannot accept this. So there is likewise, in many countries, the growing fear or even hatred for China, especially since the coronavirus came from Wuhan. But on the other hand, the Chinese, they often bribe elites and well-positioned people in many of the countries in the Indo-Pacific, especially in the least developed ones. They have a highest level reach to presidents and prime ministers, and they actually, you look at a country like Cambodia, it's a classic example. It's poor, but the ruler of Cambodia is in the pockets of the Chinese. They deliver literally. It's not a movie. I'm not talking about, truth can be stranger than fiction. They deliver bags of cash for to Prime Minister Hun Sen for him to keep on ruling, and he's now completed almost 40 years as the leader of Cambodia, and continues to rule with brutal iron hand with the full Chinese support. So likewise, most of their projects they acquire through bribery and through stealth. And Mahinda Rajapaksa and Gotabaya is actually, that's the biggest problem, because they have personally, they and their political circles around them personally benefit from Chinese investment. That's why they canceled the Japanese and Indian investments recently, and are again bringing back the Chinese. This is the problem. So economic boycott, I mean, we have done some major economic decisions. I think, and there is a dependence of some sectors of some countries on Chinese investments or intermediate goods and supplies. So, but the rare earth, if you study the rare earth minerals and the way the world diversified away from it, Japan was blackmailed by China a few years ago over rare earths, which are essential for electronics and many other components. And Japan found a way to diversify away from China and dependence on China in rare earths. Same thing we should do for almost all the critical minerals that we talk about. Our pharmaceutical industry is dependent on some components from China to manufacture drugs and such things. So we need to diversify. So there has to be a longer term strategy for this. Boycott, I think government, see, when a government officially announces it, that's like declaring economic war or a trade war. No? So that has repercussions. We are bound by WTO rules and all those things. For example, Australia is facing that kind of thing from China now, a kind of a trade war, and they're taking them to the WTO over Chinese restrictions on Australian exports. So if something comes up spontaneously, and definitely on national security grounds, we can bar them. Already 5G is out of question. Huawei and the other Chinese manufacturers are never going to get contracts from us or from any of these countries in the region. Australia has already given up on Huawei. And there are some still in the region that believe that it's the lowest cost option. They can't afford an alternative. That's why I said, with 5G also, we should pair up with Samsung, which is the South Korean one, and the main alternative to Huawei in the region in terms of patents for 5G networks, and encourage if we should look at comparative advantage. If their Quad is saying we will pump money into India for expanding our vaccine manufacturing base because we already have a lead in it. And the moment we are out of this crisis, we are going to restart the vaccine dependence. So likewise, South Korea, we should empower them with 5G. We will any day accept Samsung over Huawei.
We have some interference from, I would request everyone to mute themselves so that there's no interference. Please go ahead, Professor Chaulia.
Yeah, I'm done with that.
Okay, so the next question is from Dr. Rajesh Guti from Washington, D.C. It looks like he has dropped out, but I will still read it's a 5-part question, but I will paraphrase it. First thing is what India is going to sort of, get from being part of the Quad initiative, and to what extent India should go militarily to ally with Quad. And second is what Indian organizations or Indian diaspora can do to help India in some of these initiatives.
Yeah, what are we going to get? It's very simple. I told you the first principle or the second principle for this community is balance of power. And finding a stable balance of power in Asia is a foremost need for India, because otherwise we cannot grow, otherwise we cannot expand our influence, otherwise we are going to be permanently hemmed in as a subcontinental power, only a South Asian power. Under Narendra Modi, we have set our sights high. We say we want to become a leading power in the world. How can we become a leading power if we don't join these kind of groupings? So plurilateral initiatives is the key to create a multipolar world. So I think without a multipolar world, our aspirations to be a leading country, our aspirations to provide solutions to the world, our aspirations to raise the living standards of our own people at home, none of these can fructify without joining these kind of initiatives. It's if India wants to be a leader, we must show leadership, right? Leadership lies in bringing about teams that can change the situations or the order, existing order. So, what can the diaspora do? I think, see, the US-India bilateral, of course, the diaspora is already doing a lot. Likewise, we have a very big community in Australia, smaller one in Japan, and but there's a big one in Southeast Asia. Malaysia, for example, has a very large Indian community. So I think the diaspora usually, of course, they are to some of them, these concepts may seem a little bit far-fetched because they are usually, there are identity issues, there are issues of their own rights, as people of Indian origin living abroad, and their own, passport issues, these kind of things, their privileges back home in India. Many of them are occupied by those issues. But I would say that select groupings like yours should be lobbying people in your respective countries and asking and pushing them for when is the next, why don't you create a joint operations command for Quad? We should be advocating more. Uh, it should not be left only to the established think tanks. I mean, there are many think tanks in Washington and New York, as you know, and the problem with them is they look at it purely from a US centric perspective, and they have less of this Indo-Pacific means involvement of India. And so I think all of you should be calling for more concrete projects. Some of the things that are outlined, I mean, we should be lobbying Senate Foreign Relations Committee, House, military and intelligence committee. These are the kind of people you should be writing to and saying, we want more action on Quad. We want more, why don't we convene an Indo-Pacific summit? Like I'm saying, if we get 10,000 signatures and send it, at least Biden will see it. Whether they or Jake Sullivan will see it or Blinken will see it. So what I'm saying is, it requires a degree of activism. It's not a very, it's easy to mobilize people around a very core issue for India. Like you remember the nuclear sanctions after 1998 in Clinton, and the diaspora mobilized and brought them down. Yeah. Civil nuclear deal, 2005-6, diaspora, very targeted thing and a specific legislation. But this is not legislation. This is more like policy, right? I mean, this doesn't require any law in the US to start a summit of all the Indo-Pacific. I mean, B3W is an idea that's just come out, as we just talked about. Why don't we? I mean, we need to advocate more and more for it, I think. And it will not become a mass issue in the sense like, millions of people in the diaspora will all start cheering for it, because it's still a little bit, they're not able to see it in a concrete sense. But challenging what the Chinese are doing in Asia is sufficient basis to mobilize our diaspora. Our diaspora no longer is obsessed with Pakistan and the threat that it poses. That's all minimized. You remember after Article 370 was abolished by Prime Minister Modi, the Pakistanis, they were, huffing and puffing. They said, more Pulwama attacks will happen, this and that. They could not do anything. It is one of the greatest successes that people forget of the last 2 years, that we could bring Kashmir into the mainstream, and we could neutralize and checkmate the Pakistanis from creating havoc. So I don't think that matters much. So I think the diaspora increasingly, when we do lobbying, when we do advocacy, when we do outreach, we should be pressing more and more on the China element. In a way, generationally, we are caught in the old Pakistan thing. We've been lobbying about cross-border terrorism and jihadists and all this. Those things have not gone away. But India can manage those now. Modi is managing them much better than before. There are no terrorist attacks, touch wood, in this country for last several years. You remember what was happening about 10, 15 years ago? Every day there used to be a bomb blast in Jaipur or Agra or in Delhi or Hyderabad or Bhopal and so on. So what I'm saying is we need to also orient ourselves differently. Our threat perception has changed. The public opinion has changed in India. Now, majority of people think that China is the number one problem, number one security threat. So if the diaspora also internalizes that and pushes the lobby, we are doing a lot on Balochistan. It's a right thing. We should not step back on those issues. We are promoting Gilgit-Baltistan. We are putting pressure on the Pakistanis on FATF and all those things. That's good. But I am saying that increasingly we should now challenge. Why don't we have mass demonstrations outside the White House about the Chinese not vacating Depsan?
Okay.
Or in front of the Geneva in the United Nations headquarters in Geneva or in New York, saying this is a violation of international law and it's a violation of all civilized norms of bilateral conduct, what they're doing. So, debt trap. Let's highlight those things, what they're doing in the ocean, small island nations and developing countries in the region. I think increasingly over a 5 to 10 year period, Washington is receptive now, more and more to the China threat. The Brussels is slowly moving the direction. So the world capitals, the international community is receptive, but it requires a reorientation by the diaspora. We should set our priorities. Number one, adversary. The great thing about Vladimir Putin, as an aside, is he starts with who is my main adversary, second adversary, third adversary, and then allies, partners. Who is my main adversary? I think we have to have clarity on that.
Okay. Let's move on to the next question, Professor Chaulia. It is from Mr. P.V. Ravichandran from Chennai, India, and it's a lengthy comment and question, so I'll paraphrase it. Basically, what he's suggesting, why should not the government of India, highlight and support the independence movements in East Turkestan as well as in Tibet, and possibly take some international diplomatic actions to highlight those violations of sovereignty of those countries?
Yeah, I've raised this with the highest levels of decision making in the country, and the answer I get is it is going to be a longer term work, because right now they are simply trying to do the disengagement and de-escalation at the LAC. There's still 50,000 to 60,000 PLA forces on contested territory since last year. They've only withdrawn from two locations, Galwan and Pangong So, but they haven't done so elsewhere. What we call mirror deployment is continuing. So I think they want to hold back some cards. See, theoretically, why don't we recognize Taiwan? Why don't we say that we'll set up an embassy in Taiwan? That's even more provocative than Tibet or Xinjiang, which they control. The Chinese already control Tibet and Xinjiang. But if we say we already have informally very good relations with Taiwan, but now we decided that we are going to recognize it as a sovereign state. I think, you see, in policy making, in bargaining and negotiating, we must hold back some levers. We can't just release all our, arrows at one time. So the situation is bad at LAC, and the situation is quite tense. There are some points at friction points where 500 to 600 meters just separate Indian and Chinese forces even now. So we want to avoid a clash. We want to avoid a larger war, and we want them to step back in some points. We've already forced them out of two, and there are about two or three more points from which they need to step back. So I think it's going to be a gradual process, this pressure tactic that you're talking about. But definitely, the Tibet, Tibet is not just a card for us, right? I mean, it's something much, much bigger. We need that buffer and to push back the PLA from our right next door to our immediate borders. And we lost that. In fact, my new book, which is out end of this year, called Crunch Time, is about the national security crisis under Modi administration. And I do talk about the range of options that we have and what we've excised so far. So, but I think taking a stand on Xinjiang, on the genocide that's happened, cultural genocide at international forums and all, I think should not be an issue. We don't use, there's no vote on it. Usually, what happens is, unless there is General Assembly resolution or something like that, we are not required to vote on it. But where it comes to, should we be taking the lead on promoting the? I don't know. I mean, that's where I think our traditional diplomatic culture has been hesitant to take a stance on liberal values and all that. And then, unfortunately, as you know, there is this big propaganda campaign to show that democracy in India itself is under threat. I don't buy it at all. I'm living here and I don't see any threat to any personal liberties. There are all kinds of people who can criticize the government and do so. I mean, a channel like NDTV exists in this country even now, without any threat to its continuity. Just imagine, there is democracy. There's so much freedom to criticize. In fact, there's excess criticism of the government. That's how I see it. But anyway, the point is, the more I think the fear is that India could be dragged in to this whole values thing if we emphasize more of the if we publicly take a stance against genocide in Xinjiang. The Chinese will start a campaign, and with ironically with some support from liberals in the US and Europe, saying that Indians are committing genocide in Kashmir or some crazy such line like that. Or that democracy is under threat in India. So I think we have to use these cards a little bit sagaciously. But yes, I do agree that we have to step up, because if the Chinese are not um, willing to step back from, especially from Dapsang, we have to escalate through a variety of levers. Is 5G, keep banning 5G is a good one. Banning their apps and curtailing imports, those kinds of things are there. But we have to raise the costs of this aggression. So formalizing, even the US is not the problem. You know what? If you ask Dr. Jaishankar, he'll say Americans have not recognized Taiwan. Americans are still, they say that on paper we have a one China policy. So, and America is a great power. India is still an emerging power. It's not yet nowhere close to being a great power right now. And how can you expect us to take a bold stance when the US is not taking a stance? See? So it's complex. But I think the time for a bolder line and bolder set of counter actions is coming, because the Chinese are not in a mood to relent or to make any concessions. The points where they withdrew from Galwan and Pangong Tso, North Bank, is because they faced direct military counteroffensive by us. They lost forces, they lost terrain. Indian special forces occupied Kailash range, which is about what the Chinese say 4 to 5 kilometers inside Chinese controlled territory. That's when it forced them to go back, right? So what it means, the signal is very clear. We have to be bolder. We have to be, we have to do more pushback and we have to take risks. So yes, I think the time is coming, but there is a time for it.
The next and the last question is from Dr. Arun Agrawal, who is a pulmonologist and internist based in New York City. His question is, or more like a comment or suggestion, is that besides building these military or strategic alliances, which is fine, shouldn't we as a nation in India look a little bit inward and work on our economy and healthcare and education, other national institutions which will improve our material condition rather than solely focusing on external issues?
Yeah, it's not either or question. I think it's not like, our defense expenditure, for your information, is just for 1.5% of GDP. We are not spending a lot on military. Much of our money goes into like the social welfare schemes and stuff like that. So for domestic developmental constituencies. So it's not like, we have to first build our home and then only we can think about leading the world. That means that, we are postponing India's rise for another 20 years or 30 years. No? For poverty to be fully abolished or eradicated, healthcare to improve. Yes, the pandemic has shown a lot of deficiencies. We are open about it. We are accepting that There are many, inadequacies in our healthcare system, no doubt about it. But we are not wasting resources on military competition with China. I can tell you that we are doing just about enough to push them back, and that's why we are doing more coalitions with others, because on our own we cannot challenge them or counterbalance them on our own. So resources are limited, are finite, and in fact my view is we should spend at least 3% of GDP on defense. We're doing only 1.5. So yeah, I mean, there's no questioning that as a developing country we have a lot of challenges. The pandemic has exposed some of our frailties. There was the Financial Times, I think, of London was saying India has become the weakest link in the Quad as a result of the second wave. Of course, that is, overreaction and hyperbole, because slowly we are recovering and we are bouncing back now. And the situation is not as bad as it was in April or May anymore. But still, yeah, we have infrastructural deficits of our own. And in fact, we want more, we continue to attract and want more foreign investment in our own country for domestic, challenges to raise the living standards of our people and improve infrastructure and all that. So I don't think we should see these two as opposing pursuits or goals. We have to do these simultaneously.
And with that, I think we will have to end at this time. We have kind of exceeded our time. Usually we do 1 hour and 15 minutes. We are coming to 1 hour and 30 minutes. We had a very, very extensive, very detailed discussion. We are very thankful to our distinguished guest and distinguished speaker, Professor Chaulia. As I stated that we are recording this, it will be put on YouTube and Vimeo. And we thank you for your sparing your time. We hope that you'll be able to join once again, to talk about your new book, The Crunch Times, at time of your convenience. And I thank all the audience members who on a Saturday morning, gave 1.5 hours of their time. So thanks to all the audience. And with that, we shall adjourn the meeting.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. बहुत धन्यवाद.
Namaskar.